Good morning. Welcome to History Since 1877. All right. Are there any questions over the readings? Any concerns with the questions? All right. Go ahead and put your notes up and we will get going. All right. So, what is the Mississippi Plan?
Laws made by Southern Democrats to stop African Americans from voting.
Okay, absolutely. Perfect answer. It is a change to the Mississippi Constitution that removes the right of African Americans to vote, and it was put in place by the Democrats of Mississippi, who are like, we don't want anybody who is going to vote Republican. So the main people who are going to vote Republican at this time are the African Americans. So what we do is we develop a way to ensure that people don't get to vote if they don't vote the way that I want them to vote. All right, so what are we talking about today based on your readings? Okay, the New South and the New West, right? So how is this a New South? What's new about this South?
No slavery.
Okay, there's no slavery. Intriguingly, is this like it's the New South because there's no slavery? Has it changed dramatically? No. It still has people who are still trying to fight to continue the way it used to be. So there's this back and forth during the time of, are we changing, are we not changing? Now, what about the New West? What is the New West? Okay, farmland. What was the West prior to this? Okay, it was this great American desert. Nobody wants this. You guys, here, leave it to the Native Americans because nobody else wants it. All of a sudden, it's, oh, hey, we can use this as farmland, so let's go ahead and use it. Now, this is going to have some significant impacts too, right? So while I don't necessarily love having, we're going to nail down just 2 areas, I think it's interesting to kind of see the changes in these areas. So we're going to start off with the South. What was the problem that we saw in the South right after the Civil War?
Depends on the way you want to look at it. A lot of slaves had to go back to working for the lands that they were just on. A lot of them were killed. There's different things that happened during that time.
Okay, so basically you have a bunch of slaves who they don't have the ability to go somewhere else, find a new job. They're kind of tied to the land, but they don't own land. You also have loads of people who have lots of land, but don't have the ability to work the land, right? So how does this get resolved? Has anybody heard of sharecropping? All right, a couple people said yes. What is sharecropping? I mean, divide the word into half, right? Share, crop.
So that only share the half of it, or a part of what they're they don't share everything, just.
Yeah. So the landowners, can the landowners make any money off their land without someone to work the land? No. There's no ability for them to continue in the lifestyle that they want. Conversely, the slaves have no ability to have land, so they can't work the land. So what they come up with is a plan where the landowners will allow the former slaves to live on their land and to work the land, but they have to share the income from the crops with the landowner. Make sense? All right. So is this a good system? No. It is better than slavery, but let's walk through some of the difficulties of this. If you're a former slave, right, then I live on this land. If I own the land, what is the first thing that I might want to grow that makes my life easier?
You want workers.
Okay, you want someone to work the land, so yeah, you want kids. But in terms of crops, I probably want to have food, right? Now, if I am the landowner, do I want this person working my land to grow food on it? No, it makes me no money because they eat the crop. right? So the person who is working the land wants to grow their own food so that they can take care of their family. The person who owns the land says, no, you're not going to do that. If I am living on the land and using this land, do I want to build a nice house that is really wonderful for my family and I? I would like to, but that takes space. And the other thing is, I'm not guaranteed to be on that land next year, right? So if I build this really nice house, what do you think might happen to me if the landowner decides that I spend too much money on that or too much time on that?
You won't have any.
I might get shoved off the land and someone else lives in my house. So is there incentive for me to build a nice, solid house that's going to take care of my family? No. So there's not incentive to improve the place. There's not an incentive to grow your own food because, in fact, the landowner doesn't let you. So what is your option? I grow cotton, I grow tobacco, I grow whatever the landowner tells me to grow. But if I'm growing that, realistically, I have to have food somewhere, right? So I will probably have to buy food from someone that the landowner is working with. Now, the difficult part of this is when I buy food, do I have any money? No. So I have to borrow money to pay for the food. So when the crop comes in, what happens to all my money? I have to pay off my debt, right? So part of the money goes to the landowner, part of the money goes to whoever I am borrowing money to pay for food and supplies to build kind of a shack to live in. Am I ever going to get out of this? Probably not. As long as you have to borrow money to live, every year you're just paying back the money, so you are stuck in this condition for the rest of your life, right? Now, from the landowner's perspective, do you think that the former slave is working his tail off because, hey, if I work super hard, I can make loads of money? Probably not, because they know that the majority of the money that they make is going to go to the landowner. So some of them are sneakily trying to grow food for their family, do the right thing for their family, or trying to come up with ways that they will get more out of this relationship. So it's interesting to me, they really kind of developed this codependent relationship. So for my psychology students in the room, is a codependent relationship healthy? Okay, I got one no. Does anybody in here want to be like, yes, I want to be in a codependent relationship? Anybody know what codependent, when I say codependent relationship, what does that mean?
It sounds good in terms when you hear the word codependent, but really it's more of one person takes care of this, and you're sitting in the background and it's like, well, what can I do to help? And they're like, nothing. You can't give me anything that I want, but I can take care of you.
Yeah, it's a definite, I will meet my needs from you and you will meet your needs from me, but it's not a, hey, I care about you and let's try to make things work from a healthy relationship. It's, I will take from you what I need and you will take from me what you need. So it's really, really unhealthy, and it's really unhealthy here. So are the landowners doing great compared to what they were doing before? No. Are the former slaves doing great? No. But the interesting piece is the former slaves, what do they have going for them right now? They have the 14th and the 15th Amendment. They can vote. So they can start to change how life is for them, right? Because they can be like, hey, we're going to vote in new standards for sharecropping. Now, if I am the powerful people who have had everything in the past, Do I want this to happen? No. So how do I stop it from happening? Okay, I take away their right to vote. Legally, can I take away their right to vote? Yeah, legally, now it is in the Constitution of the United States that they have the right to vote, right? So what I do, wow. My slide disappeared. There, okay. What I do is change the state constitution. Now, this is kind of intriguing because there's nothing that says African Americans can't vote or poor people can't vote. There is just, hey, we're going to fix things to help the right people have more opportunity to vote. So, if I want the right people to vote, who do I want to vote? Okay, yes, I want white people who are going to vote in the same way I vote, right? But I can't say that. So I want wealthy people. I want people who have been here for a while to be able to vote, right? Because they understand how things are here.
So older people.
Yeah. So when you consider that, who gets to stay in the same place forever? The wealthy people. Because I don't need to worry about finding a job. I have loads of land. I am going to make money off my land. I can sit here fat, dumb, and happy, and everything works, right? But poor people, do poor people ever have to move? Why? All right, I might lose my job. I need to get a different job, right? Or I could have a better job that pays a little bit more. If I am, somebody called me a rabble-rouser one time. If I am creating difficulties for people by pushing for African Americans to have the right to vote, if I am not super wealthy, is there a way to get rid of me?
Not if you're super wealthy.
Not if I'm super wealthy. If I'm not super wealthy, though, can you get rid of me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just fire you. I say, you're not working on my land, right? All right, so one of the requirements to vote is residency. You need to have lived in the state for 2 years, and you need to live in the district for 1 year. If you are causing problems with allowing or helping people to vote that I don't want to vote, and I am powerful and you are not, it's easy for me to force you out of this area, right? I can tell the store not to sell you food. I can tell landowners not to let you work on their land. I can ensure that you have to move. When I ensure you have to move, what does that do to your right to vote? You lose that right to vote. Now, did I say I don't want black people voting here? Did I say I don't want rabble-rousers to vote here? No, I just said, hey, I just want people to live here for a while, right? Doesn't that sound reasonable? Now, think about what we would do if we were in Rogers County and we did that. You have to live in Rogers County for 3 years before you can vote. What does that mean about every RSU student? You would not be able to vote
Until our senior year.
until your senior year, yeah. And by that time, hopefully, we have convinced you on what we want to do, right? So the next thing to come up with is a $2 to $3 poll tax. Now, I know there's some people in this room that spend $4 on a cup of coffee, right? So, whatever.
That was a lot of money.
Yeah, this is now, that was then. $2, that's a lot of money at the time. Why would they say $2 or $3? If you're super wealthy, $2 or $3 doesn't bother you at all, right? But if you are scrambling for food, if you had to borrow money to pay for your family to eat today until the crop comes in, can you afford to give $2 or $3 to vote? No. You're like, I want to vote, I can't vote. So who does this ensure that they exclude? Rich people, poor people. All right? So the rich people get to vote, poor people do not. This one is intriguing because it doesn't just exclude blacks, right? Because there could be some African Americans who have money. There's probably not a lot, but there could be a few. Realistically, though, this ensures that if you're poor, you don't get to play. Why would I want laws that exclude poor people from voting?
Because they want other, like, different things that you want.
They want me to improve the school. They want me to improve the roads for everybody. I'm like, no, I don't want that. So you don't get to vote. Thanks for playing, right? The third one is kind of interesting. Realistically, you don't want criminals voting, right? I mean, they're dirtbags. Nobody likes criminals. Why do we want them to vote? With bad people, right? So it's intriguing, though. They have a specific list of offenses. And it's no conviction of bribery, burglary, theft, arson, obtaining money or goods under false pretenses, perjury, forgery, embezzlement, or bigamy. I mean, those folks are bad people, right?
I don't understand half of these words, but
Yeah. Okay, so let's walk through it. Bribery. What is bribery?
If you do this for me, I'll give you this.
Okay, I will slip you some money to take care of me. Now, it's interesting. It's actually much more likely that the rich person is going to bribe someone, right? Mm-hmm. But who is going to be convicted of bribery?
The person who accepted.
Yeah, the person who is wealthy, they're never, ever going to get convicted. So it's the person who is like, look, I really need help for my wife. I'll pay you an extra $3 if you can give me this stuff early, and I'll pay you later, right? So it winds up the people being convicted are the poorer people. Burglary, theft, so stealing something. Are rich people going to steal?
Not doing it.
Okay. I mean, they might, but realistically, rich people can go, hey, I'll flick money at you, and I'm not going to get convicted of burglary. Who is going to be convicted of burglary?
the one that takes the money.
The poor people. My children are starving. I am really concerned about them. Is there a chance that I'm going to go steal food? Theft. If I use my property to grow food, but the landowner told me I could not do that, is that theft? Yes, because you used their land in a way that they told you you couldn't. All right, arson, obtaining money or goods under false pretenses. Those are, again, things that, there's ways that you can look at those. Obtaining money or goods under false pretenses. Again, this is one of those things. If you don't know how to read, you can be told one thing and you could do a different thing. Or you could say, hey, I'm trying to do this. But people who are going to get convicted of this, for the most part, are poor. Perjury. If you are in a court in the South in the 1870s, what group is most likely to get hit for perjury? African Americans, poor people. Yeah, I mean, do you see the trend? What is the trend that we're looking at here?
I'm not going outright say if you're African American or poor, but I'm going to give you reasons why you can't, because
Yeah.
I know you'll end up doing this.
Because, yeah, I am excluding African Americans and poor people, and I will just lay out things that are likely. Now, the interesting piece, the bigamy piece, bigamy means I'm married to more than one person at the same time, right? Now, that's just bad people, right?
Depends on how you look at it though.
Okay. So this one is interesting. Under slavery, can you be married? Yes. With permission of the owner. Because a lot of times the owners, what is a way that I can make a lot of money quickly? I can have my slaves have kids, and then I have more slaves. So they would pair up slaves and say, you're married to this person, right? Now, the difficulty of this, when I sell one of the slaves, the male or the female who is married, do I have to sell the couple as a group? No. Do I have to sell the family? No. I can sell one. Now, if I sell your husband or your wife, then I tell you, I want you to get married again.
To another person.
What's that?
To another person.
Yeah, to a different person. Are you ever going to see the person that was sold again?
Most likely.
Most likely not. They might be in another state. If you're free, you can go hunt them down and say, hey, I want to hang out with you. If you're a slave and they're a slave, unless somebody gets their freedom, you will never see that person again, almost assuredly, right? So it's like they're dead. For your life, it's like they're dead. So if you know that your relationship with that person is never going to happen again, should you remarry? Some people said yes. Because you don't have this person. So let's go ahead and get remarried, right? What happens then at this point? The slave owners still have documentation because they are the ones that married you, right? So now they come back and they go, oh, I married you to this person, and then and they won't say, after I sold that person, I married you to this person. They just say, you're married to two people at the same time. Did you ever live with both people in a marriage relationship at the same time? No. So, in one sense, is this different than if you marry somebody, you divorce them, and you marry somebody else? It's kind of the same, right? Because you're not able to live with this person anymore. You're not able to be in a marriage relationship, so you have a second marriage relationship. I am not saying that this is perfect and this is, the way things should have been. I'm just saying this was life. So realistically, who is most likely to get hit with bigamy? The former slaves. Now, I will flip it on its head. A lot of the slave owners would have sexual relationships with several slaves. Now, if you really want to talk about living in an inappropriate relationship, you have your wife and you have a slave or two or three slaves that you're living in a sexual relationship at the same time in. That is the intentional meaning of bigamy, right? So there might not have been a marriage ceremony, but you are actually more the bigamist. Now, what are the chances any of these guys who are wealthy former plantation owners are ever going to get hit with bigamy? 0 to 1. Yeah, 0. Never going to happen. All right, so if you get through the residency requirements, if you have never committed a crime, then I just want you to be able to read, right? Doesn't that seem reasonable? because then you know what the rules are and you can obey the laws and you can know what the better laws are. So it seems really reasonable. Now, is there a way that I could use this against poor people or African Americans?
Literate, so.
Okay. Most of the poor, have they ever been able to go to school in the South? No. So if you're not able to go to school, how are you getting your literacy? How are you learning to read? You're not. So that excludes the poor. And actually, under slavery, it was illegal for slaves to learn to read. Because if my slave learns how to read, then they could read road maps. They could, learn how they can escape. So you're like, no, you're not going to learn. So a lot of former slaves can't read. For those that can read, if I want you to vote, because remember, when you walk into the courthouse, can I tell which party you're going to vote for?
By the way you dress and the color of your skin.
Okay. At that time, and I don't remember if I talked about this, how do you vote today? I mean, for the people who voted in the election yesterday, what's the process to vote? You go in and you say, hey, this is my voter registration card. I want to vote. They hand you a thing. You go into a little private area and you mark your ballot. You turn your ballot in. And when you finish, does anybody know how you voted? No. At this time, they would give you a ballot, and the ballot was different if you were Republican or different if you're a Democrat. And often it was a different color. And so when you came into the courthouse, they knew which way you were going to vote by the color of the document that you're bringing in. So when I walk in, they're like, oh, that person's voting in the way I want them to, or that person's voting in a way I don't want them to. They immediately know, right? So when you walk in, I can say, all right, have you been here? Yes. Have you committed a crime? No. Can you pay the poll tax? Yes. Now, I want to prove that you can read. If you're voting the way that I want you to, then I pull out a section that is super easy to read. Dick and Jane went running, right? What are the chances that even if you're not very literate, you got that down? Or I can read it to you and you just explain it to me. So I'm going to ask you a very simple question, like, hey, is there a $2 or $3 poll tax? And what is your answer? Yes. But if I don't want you to vote, then I'm going to go to some really obscure part and I'm going to use a lot of big words and I'm going to say, what does this mean? Now, intriguingly, I determine the answer, right? So even if like 10 people were sitting in the room and 9 of them would say, oh yeah, that's absolutely the right answer, I can say, nope, that's not the correct answer. There's no way for you to argue with me because I am the final one that says. So now I can ensure that the voting goes in the way I want it to go, right? I've got almost a foolproof method of ensuring that the voters I want to vote get to, and the voters I don't want to vote don't get to. The last thing that's kind of interesting, we're going to have separate schools. Why would I want separate schools?
To give you different qualities of education.
Okay. Realistically, if you have 2 classrooms in the same place, you're going to have things different, right? Now, if one school has money and one school does not, what are the differences going to be?
Foreign crimes and wealthy and no crimes.
Okay, so the poor people probably are not going to be able to come to school as much. There may be some criminal activity. It could be more dangerous to go there. Say- Yeah, you could have either no teacher or a teacher that's not as qualified because you're paying a lot less for the teacher. You could have no textbooks versus brand new textbooks. A lot of times in the South, there were actually the one school would be in outstanding condition. There were schools that when they started to do building inspections, the schools were condemned. Like, this is so dangerous that no one should be in this building, but they had been having school in this building for decades, right? So you're in a dangerous building, you have no textbook, your teacher may be, coming in new all the time because we're not paying enough, and if you get a good teacher, we're going to hire them for the rich school, right? So what does that mean about the educations? If you're in the rich school, good education, right? If you're in the poor school, probably not. So what does this do for this other stuff? It makes your ability to read less. It makes it more likely that you are going to be convicted of a crime. It makes it more likely that you are not going to be able to establish a residency for a long time because you can't keep really, really good jobs. So between 1865 and 1892, the registered black voters dropped from 142,000 to 8,600. If I want a certain group of people to stop voting, is that effective? Oh, yeah. Now, the interesting thing is, people don't usually look at it, but it also knocks 30,000 white poor voters out. Now, knowing that if you voted for the Democratic Party at this time, then they were going to help you roll through, what does this do to the votes for Republicans at the time? You guys are all... Yeah. So you lost 132 and another 30,000. So 160,000 people that were able to vote, their votes are gone. Can that flip the votes in a state? Yeah. So once other states see this, what do you think they might want to do? Yeah. They're like, hey, we can do the same thing. We didn't get called on it, so let's go ahead and do this. All right. At the same time, there's some other things going on. The 14th and 15th Amendment, can I discriminate against you? Legally, I shouldn't be able to discriminate, right? Everyone is a citizen. Everyone has the same rights. So over time, there are organizations, companies, and they're like, can you tell me who I legally have to work with and be friends with, or do I get to make those decisions myself? And so all these court trials start moving up the chain. 5 of them hit the Supreme Court at the same time. And it's all dealing with racism and discrimination, and can the U.S. government force someone to work with someone that they don't want to work with? Okay, so right now, the answer is yes, I can tell you that you're going to live with someone in your dorm that you may not like, right? Because, hey, suck it up, that's the way it is. But at the time, the Supreme Court says 13th and 14th Amendments only apply to the states. The government cannot discriminate. So I, as a representative of Rogers State University, a government entity, cannot discriminate against you guys. Now, could you discriminate against each other? So if there is, and just for the sake of not getting in trouble, I will say, we have a Martian in this class, right? And this Martian tries to come into the class. Can I stop them legally? No, because that's discriminatory. However, if I go to some of you guys and I go, that Martian should not be in this class, and it'd be better for you if that Martian was not in this class. What happens if some of you catch that Martian outside of this classroom, and every time they start to walk in, you kind of, give them a little shove, kind of make life difficult for them? Are they going to continue to come to this class? They could, but probably not. Because you can make life difficult enough that they're like, okay, it's just not worth it. I can't do this. I can't deal every day coming in here getting hammered. I'm just done, right? So at the end of the day, did I discriminate? No.
Technically, yes.
Okay. Legally, no. But yes, I absolutely discriminated because I let you guys discriminate. Right?
We looked past it.
Yes. And that's what is going on here, is the Supreme Court says, well, the state can't discriminate, but people can. What that really means is if I work for the state, as long as I close my eyes, as long as I'm like, okay, la, 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 I don't care, I'm not seeing this, then discrimination happens. And it is implicitly approved by me. So the federal government is not allowed to force individuals or businesses to obey laws against discrimination. So once that starts, if I'm in a restaurant in the South and I know that the very, very important wealthy people don't want African Americans in my restaurant, what do you think I'm going to do? I am going to start saying, no, African Americans can't eat in here because I'll lose these wealthy people. You can only come to eat here once a month. They can come to eat here every night. I'm going to take care of them. Right? And then over time, we start to develop, okay, if you're one of the wealthy white people, you can come in the front. If you're one of the African Americans, you come in the back and you eat in the back, but they won't have to see you. Right? So how does this work? In buses, where do the white people get to sit? In the front. Where do the black people sit? In the back. If I have a water fountain, I will have a water fountain for white people and a water fountain for black people, right? Does that make any sense at all? No, it's insane. Like, the water is going to be different? What? Right?
I mean, the fountains they made were different.
Okay, actually, yeah, so you do start to have nicer and less nice things. But the water coming out is the same water. The food coming out is the same food. So when you allow discrimination, when you force discrimination, is there any positive that can come out of this? No, because at some point, one side determines they are better than the other one. When everybody's together, then you're like, okay, hey, this person's a decent person, right? I can live with them. They're not going to give me some disease, whatever. So yeah, it's fine. But when I discriminate, then I can make people say, okay, this is better, this is less better, this is worse, right? And it's people. All right. Then we move into, as I said, you had the trains, you had separation in which cars people could sit in. But this gets us into a different problem. Under slavery, what defines a black person?
Any African American heritage?
Okay, yes, any African American heritage. So let me walk through some scenarios with you. As I said, some of the slave owners determined that they want to have sex with their female slaves. Is this an appropriate relationship? No, because one has power, one does not, right? But if I have sex with my slave and I have a child, is that child white or black? The dad's white, mom's black.
They become house slaves. They're considered slaves at the end of the day, even if the dad is white.
Yeah. Which I'll admit, so what you said, just for the TV folks, the dad is not counted. It is based on the mom. And so I don't understand how you could have a child and make that child a slave. It's beyond me, because that's your kid. But people did that. They're like, nope, I have 5 kids. This kid is my white kid with my white wife, and so this child will own everything here. These children were born to slave women, and these children will be owned by my other child. Again, it just, I can't understand how you could do that to your children, but it's done. So you have a child who is half white, half black, right? Your son then has a relationship with that child. Now that child, 3/4 white, 1/4 black. Is that child considered white or black?
Still black.
Black. You do this for 15 generations. You can't tell if you have a child that is 15/16 white and 1/16 black, what are the chances that you would identify that person visually as a black person? Almost zero, right? I mean, there's probably no physical discriminator that's going to be like, yeah, that person's black. By the rules of the South, what color is that child? Black. So to give you a specific example, there is actually a book called The Little German Slave Girl. And so a German family comes into New Orleans. The mom is dead. The dad's trying to make life better for his kids. But the kids are little, so no one, to get their way paid from Germany, the family has to be sold as servants, and the boat owner gets the money. So people come in and they're like, we'll take the dad but not the kids. And he says, no, I am taking my kids with me. Or they'll say, hey, we'll take this child, but we won't take the other children. And he's like, no. Finally, it gets to the place where the boat owner's like, look, you don't have a choice anymore. Whoever we sell you to, because we're not paying any more money for you. The family gets split up. Later, another German family comes in. They're walking through New Orleans, and they see the little girl, and she's grown up. And so the lady runs over to her, and she's like, hey, what are you doing here? And the young lady looks at her, and she's like, go away from me. Don't talk to me. And she goes, why not? And she goes, look, I'm a prostitute. Just back off. And they're like, no, we're not going to let you live in prostitution. You are my friend's daughter. We're going to take care of you. And so they actually grab her and they take her, and they, get everything started to be taken care of. What do you think the former slave owner says? That's my slave. You can't take her. So there's a court battle. And in the court battle, they are fighting over if she is a little white girl or if she is a little black girl and enslaved. Why don't they just look at her and say, oh, well, this is it? Because you can't do that at this time. There are too many people that look white, right? So they finish the court battle. She actually wins the court battle. She gets her freedom. Once her freedom is won, she admits that she's not the little German girl. She actually was born into slavery. Her mother was a slave, but she looks like a little German girl, right? So the interesting piece here is you have citizens committees that developed saying this discrimination is stupid. If you can't look at me and tell me if I'm white or black, then why am I being stuck in a different place, right? So guys like Mr. Plessy, is this guy white or is he black?
He's white, he's probably black.
Okay, so 7/8 white and 1/8 black. So for the South, is he considered white or black? He is considered black. But when you look at him, would you presume that he is black? No. So Mr. Plessy actually intentionally goes on train rides. He goes and he sits in the car with white people. Any problem with that? No. Until once he hands his ticket over, he says, oh, by the way, I'm black. And the train conductor says, oh, I'm sorry, sir, you're going to have to move back to the black car. And he's like, no. You didn't tell me to move before I told you I was black. There's no reason for me to move. You couldn't tell, and this is a stupid, illegal law. So once he says he is black, what are they required to do?
Sit in the black car.
Yeah, so they physically pull him from the car and they arrest him for being in a white car as a black person. Right? So once he's arrested, they go ahead and they take it to the court, and the court says, no, you're wrong. They go up again. At the end of the day, the Supreme Court says, yes, he knew he was a black man sitting in a white car, so therefore he is guilty, and they convict him. So he's intending to get the law thrown out. The law is not thrown out. Now everybody is just like, no, this is the way it is. So this is where you get your Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws are going to say, hey, if you're black, this is where you get to sit. If you are black, these are the restaurants you can go into. These are the places that you can sleep. Has anybody ever seen the Green Book, the movie? All right, there's a movie and it talks about a rich black singer who is going into the South in the 1950s. And he has to have a book that shows which motels he can go into because he's black, and there are other motels that they are not going to allow him in.
Is there a movie out for that?
Yeah, it's a movie.
I've seen the movie.
Yeah. All right, then we have people who are frustrated by this, right? So I'm going to just give you 3 examples. Ida Wells, she was born a slave. When she got her freedom, missionaries came down and taught her how to read and write. So in her head, how do I get to improve my life? Education, right? So she pushes for education, but she sees her friends who are being lynched. She sees other people who are being harmed, and she says, I'm not going to live with this. So she starts editing a newspaper. And she starts, she actually has to move to Chicago because they burned down her newspaper office. And so she starts condemning racism with this newspaper, saying, hey, I'm going to let people know how awful life is so that people will change. She helps create the NAACP and tries to improve the lives of colored people. All right, then you have Booker T. Washington. Again, Booker T. Washington is born in the South, right? So in his mind, how do you improve life? Do you go out and shake your fist and punch people in the face? No. What happens if you do?
You're arrested.
You get arrested, you get lynched. So he says, you know what? What we need to do, let's focus on education. Let's focus on being the best people you can be. When you build a business and when you prove to the white people in the South that we can do everything just as well as they are, then they will be forced to accept us as equals. So his thought process is, let's build our way up. Then you have W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois is born in Massachusetts. Different background, right? He is born to wealth. So he goes down to college at Fisk University in Nashville. What do you think he's treated like when he gets to Nashville? Yeah, they're like, oh, you're black. You're going to be. He's like, no, I'm rich. I don't care what color my skin is. I'm rich. You will treat me like that. And they're like, no, we're not. So he gets angry and he says, we are going to demand people treat us well. Once they treat us well, then we will start being better citizens. These guys all actually start fighting between themselves on how to improve your life. Do you fight for it and then earn it? Do you have to earn it and hope that someone respects it? Do you move to a different area and just try to convince the North to change what's happening in the South and start a new Reconstruction? All right. So we kind of talked about the South at a lot of length. So let's talk about the plains. We move out to the west, right? Most of this stuff we've already talked about. You got the Homestead Act, so people are moving out. Many have to return. Some of them are able to stay out there, right? And those that stay out there, are there any problems caused with the Native Americans? All right, we kind of talked about that. So how do I resolve this? The first thing we do is we come up with a treaty with the Native American nations. All right, so I sit down with the leaders of the Native American nations and I say, all right, tell me, I have a little map out. Where do you live? Where is your tribe? And they say, all right, well, we go up to this river, right? And over here, there's some mountains. And so we go over to these mountains and there might be a river over here. Or we say, we go down to where this different nation lives. Now, what does that do for me as somebody coming in from the outside? If I want to narrow where these people are staying, what does this description do for me? Tells me where they live, right? So now I say, okay, we're going to make an agreement. This is your reservation. You have to stay on this reservation. Okay? Some other nation, this is your reservation. This is going to work perfectly, right? Because once I get them to say, I will never leave this reservation, then life is going to be amazing. Then I can put settlers up to here. I can, they're going to, everybody work together. Does anybody see any way that this could go bad? All right, yes. How does it go bad?
I mean, you're trying to force them to lose some of the land that they already have. They're not going to sit there and just be like, you want to come in and take my land? Sure, you can have it. No, they're going to fight back.
All right. So for the most part, this is where they say they live. But what happens, realistically, most of the plains nations are going to be very migratory, right? And they follow what?
The buffalo.
Buffalo. They follow animals that they hunt. So what happens when the buffalo come up here? They move up there. So all we have to do is put little signs for the buffalo saying, do not move north of this line, right? And the buffalo are going to read them and they're going to be like, oh, that's right. I've got to stay down here. Buffalo are not going to do that, right? So what happens? Okay, you're moving a little ahead of me, but yeah. The first thing that happens is these Native Americans move out of their reservation. When they move out of their reservation, they start bumping into new settlers. And when they start bumping into new settlers, people start to die, right? Because they either are going to shoot the settlers or the settlers shoot them. There's conflict. When there's conflict and it's outside of this reservation, who's at fault? The Native Americans, because I told you to stay in here, right? So the army will drive them back. Now, when they move into this area, then again, the army will drive them back because it causes conflicts. And so over time, you start to have Indian wars, right? And the more settlers that move in, the more Indian wars there are. Now, what about when the settlers move into this area here? Then Indians shoot them. And now the army has to go in and say, look, you can't live here. You have to move out. And so the army is forced in between the settlers and the Native American people. And for the most part, the settlers can call back to their congressman. Can the Native American peoples call back to their congressman and complain? No. So who's going to take the losing part of this? Native Americans. All right. So you have the 1851 and 1868 Fort Laramie treaties that develop these reservations that say, hey, this is what we're going to do. When things don't start working, then the army says, I have to figure out how to keep them in there. If they are following the buffalo, what is the best way for me to ensure that they don't follow the buffalo out of their reservation? Kill the buffalo. Right? That's exactly what you said. So I kill the buffalo. How does this impact the Native Americans? Okay, their food source, how they build their living area. This is their lifestyle. So for us, and I'll throw this out there, I don't know it's a complete equivalent, I'm going to take away your cars. How is that going to impact your life?
Can't go anywhere fast.
Okay, you can't go anywhere. As long as you're on campus, you're okay. Can you get to work? No. Can you go to the grocery store? No.
You gotta ask people for rides.
Yeah, after a while, this is going to get really ugly, right? So, same thing happens. The Native Americans have fought during the summers. So during the winter, you kind of, get things calm and you stay where you need to go. The army decides, I don't want to fight people who are ready to fight me, which as a former military guy, that makes sense to me. I don't want an even fight. That's just stupid. So if I don't want an even fight, then what I do is I go ahead and put a position where I know I can win. The best position I can come into is if you take all of the males and go hunting, then I take over your area. And when you come back, I go, hey, I got your wife and children. You guys are going to stop doing stupid stuff that I don't want you to. Or next time you go out hunting, your wife and children won't be back. Right? And so they start imposing things on the Native American tribes. I know some people are saying, hey, that's extermination. I don't believe that there was an intentional extermination. It's not like the Germans and the Jews. However, it is definitely a forced acclamation. You will do what I say, or your life gets super difficult, right? All right. Over time, the people in Washington come up with a different idea. How can I make the Native American peoples learn how to farm? I've got these reservations, and they can go anywhere on these reservations, which means they go out and they don't listen to us and they don't do what we say. How do I make sure that they do what I want them to do? There you go. Here's your 160 acres. Here's your 160 acres. Here's your 160 acres, right? Now, for the white settlers, is this a good thing? When they gave the Homestead Act, is the Homestead Act a positive thing for whites? I'm giving you free 160 acres to farm on. Loads of people love that, right? For the Native Americans who are not farmers, is it really good for me to take all of this territory and say, Joe, you get to live here. Sam, you get to live here, you know. And so everyone gets a small piece. Do they even understand how that works? No. So we the U.S. government hands them this property and we're like, hey, we're being so magnanimous. We're just being wonderful people. But at the end of the day, when you give them property, then everybody who signs up for property, they only need about this much. Now, part of it is, does anybody in here have a family member who did not sign the Dawes Act? Okay, why not?
They didn't trust the government.
Exactly. I don't know what you're doing here, but I don't trust you. So what happens to those people? You get no land. And they don't say, hey, this area over here is for people who don't sign. They just say, nope, you don't get land. The people that signed get land. So basically, everyone is forced into these little farmlands. And I think there are some people who are intending it for good. There's a lot of other people who are like, you know what? We can take all of this land and use it, right? All right. So the other problem, initially, the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Seminole, Osage, Miami, Peoria, the Sac and Fox, the Seneca, and a portion of the Sioux are excluded from this because they're all farmers. They have been moved into this area, but they are farming. Over time, they're like, this has worked really well, so we are going to take this property. The other piece that's really weird, when I give you the land, do I guarantee it's good land? What happens if I put you in the middle of a swamp?
Figure it out.
Yeah, figure it out. So problems, there's a lot of problems with this. The other thing, because most Native Americans don't understand the concepts of property, people can come in and buy the property from them, right? And they don't understand that they're giving up their property forever. So a lot of people decide to steal their land or, do different things. And this causes a whole lot of problems for decades afterwards. So there's a lot of interesting things happen within the West and the South during this time, primarily because things are changing dramatically and we're trying to keep up. All right, so everybody, what is the Mississippi Plan?
Intimidation towards black voters.
Say it again.
Intimidation towards black voters.
Okay, it's a way to prevent black voters from voting,
Yeah.
poor voters from voting. All right, what's the impact? It does it. It's very effective. Who are the exodusters? We talked about that last class period, right? Who are the exodusters?
African Americans that moved to West.
Okay, they're African Americans who moved from the South to the West thinking their life was going to be better. What causes the Indian Wars on the Great Plains? Yeah, white settlers moving into the area and trying to figure out how do you get new settlers in without taking off the old people, and the answer is you don't. How do they end? Basically, we set up the reservations, and then we hand, with the Dawes Act, we say, hey, this is where you're going to live, and we take away the buffalo. So we put the Native American peoples in a position where they're not able to fight back. All right, what does the Dawes Act do?
Splits native lands.
Okay, it's very much like the Homestead Act, except it takes lands that I have given you as a tribe and says, here's your little piece. So I don't know how many people in this room have Native American ancestry, but there's a lot of people who did sign up for it and have benefits. There are people who said, I don't trust the government, I am not signing up for this nonsense, and then they wind up without benefits, right? All right, so for the next class period, we're going to talk about immigration, and we're going to talk about politics, because everybody likes talking about politics. Yeah. All right. Are there any questions over what we talked about? All right, you guys can disappear. So I always struggle. For next Monday, we are going to be talking about immigrating from Europe into the major cities of America. We're going to talk about how this impacts lifestyles and how people live. We are going to talk about how politicians deal with the immigration. We're going to talk about political bosses. We're going to talk about civil service and how in the Civil Service Act we're able to set people up either that you help my political campaign and I will make your life good or bad, or to try to set up a system where you get hired based on your ability to do the job. And finally, we'll talk about the Granger movement. The Grangers are farmers, and they're folks who get together and they say, hey, we're really struggling to make our farms work. They decide that the best way to make them work is to move politically and engage to ensure that they have political representation. They come up with a populist party, and this is the first opportunity that people get to say, hey, I don't like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. I want you to pay attention to what I need, and I need you to take care of my needs. So it has a huge change in how things are done. And so I will see you guys on Monday. All right.